Imagine standing alone in the middle of the open plains, surrounded by nothing but the whisper of the wind and the endless horizon. Then, out of nowhere, a wild Mustang appears, but something is wrong. He's not running. He's not afraid. Instead, he walks toward you, his eyes filled with something deeper, a silent plea for help. The photographer, who used to capture the untamed beauty of Mustangs, had never seen anything like this before. But when he finally understood what the horse was trying to say, his heart nearly stopped. What was the Mustang desperately trying to show him? What shocking truth was waiting just beyond the hills? Get ready for a story of mystery, courage, and an unbreakable bond that defies all logic. The golden sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the vast open plains. The wind swept through the tall grass, rustling it like whispers from an unseen world. Ethan Parker adjusted the lens of his camera, scanning the horizon for the perfect shot. As a wildlife photographer, he had traveled far and wide to capture the raw beauty of nature. But there was something about wild horses, untamed, free, and defiant against time itself, that always stole his breath. He had been tracking a herd of Mustangs for hours, keeping his distance to avoid startling them. Their movements were poetry synchronized, fluid, a display of unity that no human hand could ever truly tame. But then something unusual happened. A lone Mustang broke away from the herd. Ethan lowered his camera, frowning as the horse trotted toward him, its powerful muscles rippling beneath a coat dusted with dirt and sweat. That in itself was strange. Wild Mustangs didn't just approach humans. They avoided them at all costs. The Mustang slowed as he drew closer. His coat was a striking blend of chestnut and white, his mane tangled by the wind. But it was his eyes that made Ethan's breath hitch. They weren't wild. They weren't fearful. They were pleading. Ethan instinctively took a step back. This wasn't normal. Something was very wrong. The Mustang tossed his head, snorting impatiently, then stomped the ground as if urging Ethan to follow. "Easy, boy," Ethan murmured, holding his hands up. He wasn't sure why, maybe out of habit, maybe because he could feel the tension radiating off the animal like heat of desert sand. The Mustang pawed at the ground again, then turned slightly, looking back over his shoulder toward the distant hills. He let out a sharp, urgent neigh, then faced Ethan again. It was as if he were asking for something. Ethan swallowed hard. He had spent years studying animal behavior. But this was different. The horse wasn't just lost. He wasn't just curious. He needed help. Heart pounding, Ethan reached for his camera again, snapping a few quick shots. The Mustang didn't flinch, didn't run. He simply stood there, watching, waiting. Then, suddenly, he turned and began to walk away. Ethan hesitated for only a second before following. Whatever this horse was trying to show him, whatever had driven a wild Mustang to seek out a human, he had to find out. And deep down, he knew it was going to change everything. Ethan's boots crunched against the dry earth as he followed the Mustang across the plains. The horse moved with purpose, his ears flicking back occasionally as if checking to make sure. Ethan was still behind him. Every instinct in Ethan's body screamed that this was unnatural. Wild horses didn't seek out human help, especially not like this. The sun had dipped lower, washing the sky in soft hues of orange and pink. Ethan's camera hung loosely around his neck, forgotten for the moment. His heart pounded in his chest, a mix of curiosity and apprehension urging him forward. "What are you trying to show me?" he muttered under his breath. The Mustang didn't hesitate. He picked up his pace, trotting toward the distant hills. Ethan felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple as he quickened his steps to keep up. The terrain was rough, the dry grass crunching beneath his boots. He adjusted the strap of his backpack, mentally kicking himself for not bringing more water. A few times, the Mustang stopped and turned his head, his deep brown eyes locking onto Ethan's. There was something almost human in his gaze, something desperate. Ethan had spent years photographing wildlife, bears, wolves, and elk, but never had he experienced something like this. Animals acted on instinct, survival. They didn't ask for help, and yet this one was. The hills loomed ahead. The shadows stretched longer with each passing minute. Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. Was there a trap, an injured herd member, or something worse? The Mustang climbed the slope with ease, his hooves barely making a sound against the rocky ground. Ethan, however, struggled. He dug his boots into the earth, gripping onto a few stray branches for balance as he pulled himself up the incline. His breath came in short gasps, but he pushed forward, his determination outweighing his exhaustion. At the top of the hill, the Mustang stopped. Ethan staggered up beside him, planting his hands on his knees as he tried to catch his breath. When he finally looked up, his stomach clenched. Down in the valley below, partially hidden in the tall grass, lay another horse. Ethan's pulse jumped. He grabbed his camera, zooming in for a closer look. The horse, another Mustang, was motionless, its coat a deep, dark bay. Even from this distance, Ethan could tell something was wrong. The Mustang beside him let out a low, mournful whinny. Ethan lowered his camera. "Is that why you brought me here?" he whispered. The Mustang stomped his hoof. Urgency radiated off him. Without another second of hesitation, Ethan started down the hill, carefully picking his way through the uneven terrain. The closer he got, the more he could see. The fallen horse's chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. His legs twitched weakly. He was alive, but barely. Ethan's stomach twisted. He had seen injured animals before, but something about this felt different, more personal. The Mustang who had led him here remained at the top of the hill, his ears pinned forward. Watching anxiously, Ethan knelt beside the fallen horse, reaching out a hesitant hand. "Hey there, buddy," he murmured. The horse flinched, but didn't move beyond that. His body was covered in small cuts, his ribs faintly visible beneath his coat. His breathing was ragged, almost wheezing. Ethan's throat tightened. This wasn't just an accident. This horse had been in distress for a while. But how? Ethan gently pressed his hand against the horse's neck, feeling for heat of fever. The animal was dehydrated, weak. If help didn't come soon, he wouldn't make it. A sharp neigh cut through the air. Ethan looked up to see the first Mustang pacing anxiously, his tail flicking in agitation. It was almost as if he understood the urgency, as if he knew time was running out. Ethan cursed under his breath. He wasn't a vet, but he knew enough to recognize that this horse needed immediate care. He grabbed his phone from his pocket, his fingers trembling slightly as he checked for a signal. No service, of course, out here in the middle of nowhere. Reception was spotty at best. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. He had two options: try to carry water up from his truck and do what little he could on his own, or find a way to get real help. The Mustang beside him let out another soft noise, lowering his head toward the fallen horse. Ethan made up his mind. He couldn't do this alone. He turned back toward the hill. "All right, big guy," he said to the first Mustang. "I need you to help me one more time." The Mustang flicked his ears forward. Ethan tightened his grip on his camera and took one last look at the fallen horse. Then he took off running toward his truck. Time was running out. Ethan's boots pounded against the dry earth as he sprinted back toward his truck. His breath came in sharp bursts, his heart hammering against his ribs. The setting sun cast long shadows over the land, and with each passing second, the temperature dipped lower. The wild Mustang followed him for a few strides, then stopped. Watching intently from the hilltop, Ethan glanced back once, locking eyes with the horse. It was as if the Mustang was silently urging him on. He pushed forward, dodging patches of uneven ground, his muscles burning from the exertion. His truck was parked at least a mile away, near the edge of the open plains where he had first started. Tracking the herd, he cursed under his breath. He hadn't expected to be this far out when the Mustang approached him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the truck came into view. It was coated in dust from the long drive out, a reminder of just how isolated he was. Ethan yanked the door open, nearly collapsing into the driver's seat. His hands shook as he reached for his phone again. Still no service, damn it, he muttered. He slammed his palm against the steering wheel, his mind racing. There was no way he could leave now, not with the injured Mustang needing immediate help. The closest town was over an hour away, and by the time he made it there and back, it might be too late. Ethan took a deep breath, forcing himself to think. He had some emergency supplies in the truck. Water, a first aid kit, even a tarp. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Digging through the back seat, he grabbed a large canteen and filled it with fresh water from his supply. His hands moved on instinct, packing everything he thought might help: some rope, a spare blanket, even his camera, in case he needed to document the Mustang's condition for a vet later. With his arms full, he slammed the truck door shut with his hip and turned back toward the hills. The Mustang was still there, waiting. Ethan took off again, his legs protesting with every step, his mind replaying the image of the injured Mustang, its shallow breaths, its too thin body. He had seen plenty of wild horses in rough shape before, but this felt different. This Mustang had been suffering for days, maybe longer, and the fact that another wild horse had sought out a human for help, that was something Ethan had never seen before. By the time he reached the top of the hill, again, his chest burned from exertion. He stopped for a moment, gulping down a breath before carefully making his way back down toward the fallen Mustang. The injured horse hadn't moved much. His breathing was still labored, his ribs rising and falling in uneven patterns. The first Mustang let out a low, anxious whinny, stepping closer as Ethan knelt beside the downed horse. "All right, buddy," Ethan murmured, unscrewing the cap of the canteen. "Let's get you some water." He carefully poured some into his cupped hand and brought it to the Mustang's muzzle. The horse flared his nostrils, barely reacting at first. Then, after a few agonizing seconds, he parted his lips slightly and took a few weak sips. Ethan exhaled, relief flooding through him. It wasn't much, but it was something. He reached for the blanket and gently draped it over the Mustang's body, hoping to trap some warmth against the dropping temperature. His fingers skimmed over the horse's coat, feeling the sharp outlines of bones beneath the fur. This wasn't just dehydration. This horse had been starving. Ethan's gut twisted. This wasn't a case of getting lost from the herd. This Mustang had been abandoned. His jaw clenched. Wild horses didn't simply abandon one of their own, not unless something had forced them to. And that's when he saw it, a faint mark near the Mustang's shoulder. Ethan leaned in, his brows knitting together as he traced the shape with his fingers. The hair was shorter here, uneven, as if it had been shaved down before. He knew that shape. He had seen it before. A brand. Ethan's blood ran cold. This wasn't just any wild Mustang. This horse had once belonged to someone, and someone had left him to die. His mind spun. Wild Mustangs were protected under federal law, but there were loopholes. People adopted them through government programs, and not all of them had good intentions. Some horses were taken in, only to be neglected or abandoned when they became too much to handle. Ethan gritted his teeth. If that was the case, then whoever had done this had deliberately left the horse out here, knowing he wouldn't survive. The first Mustang, the one who had led him here, let out another sharp snort. Ethan looked up, meeting those deep, intelligent eyes once again. Had this horse once been part of the same herd? Had they been separated when humans got involved? Had he lost his companion, only to find him dying here alone? Ethan's chest tightened. He needed to get this horse help now. But how? He was miles away from civilization, with no phone signal and no way to transport a full-grown Mustang on his own. He swallowed hard, rubbing a hand over his face. There had to be a way. Then he glanced at his camera. A thought struck him. If he couldn't call for help, maybe he could get the world to listen another way. Ethan lifted the camera, his fingers tightening around the lens. He snapped a picture of the injured Mustang, capturing every painful detail: the hollowed-out ribs, the brand, the silent suffering in his eyes. Then he turned the lens toward the first Mustang. The horse held his gaze, standing tall against the fading sunlight, a symbol of loyalty, of determination, of an unspoken bond. Ethan lowered the camera, his resolve hardening. He was going to save this horse, even if he had to fight the whole damn world to do it. Ethan's hands moved with steady precision as he reviewed the photos on his camera. Each image told a heartbreaking story: the fallen Mustang's frail body, the desperation in his half-lidded eyes, the faded brand near his shoulder, and then there was the other Mustang, standing strong beside him, a silent guardian refusing to leave. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a message. Ethan had spent years capturing the beauty of nature, but this was different. This wasn't just about photography anymore. This was about saving a life. His mind raced through the options. He still had no signal. The nearest rancher town was at least an hour away. There was no way he could carry the Mustang back to his truck, and even if he did, lifting a full-grown horse into the bed of his vehicle was impossible without proper equipment. But he knew one thing: he needed help. His eyes flicked toward the first Mustang. The horse stood patiently, ears flicking forward every time Ethan moved. He wasn't just watching, he was waiting. "You trust me, huh?" Ethan murmured, adjusting the strap on his camera. "Well, I hope you know what you're doing, buddy." He turned, sprinting back up the hill to higher ground, hoping for even the weakest sliver of a phone signal. Every step felt like a battle against time. The injured Mustang didn't have long. Reaching the highest point, he yanked out his phone, holding it toward the sky. 1 bar. Ethan's heart pounded. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He quickly tapped into his contacts, scrolling until he found the name he was looking for: Dr. Valerie Quinn, ECIN vet. The call rang once, twice, then connected. "Ethan?" Valeri's voice crackled on the other end. "Didn't expect to hear from you out of nowhere." "No time to explain," Ethan panted. "I found a Mustang. He's in bad shape, dehydrated, weak. He's been out here a while, and there's an old brand on him." Silence. Then Valeri's tone sharpened. "Brand? Are you sure?" "Yeah, and he wasn't alone. Another Mustang led me straight to him like he was asking for help." Ethan heard the sound of keys jingling and a door opening on her end. "Send me your location. I'm getting my trailer. If that Mustang was abandoned, we need to report this fast." "I'll send pictures too," Ethan said. "Just hurry, Val. He doesn't have much time. I'm on my way." The call ended. Ethan quickly sent his coordinates and a few of the clearest pictures, hoping it would be enough for Valerie to prepare for what was coming. When he turned back, the first Mustang was still watching him from below, as if waiting for an answer. Ethan jogged back down, kneeling beside the injured Mustang once more. "Help's coming," he whispered, brushing his fingers gently over the horse's neck. "Just hold on." The Mustang barely reacted. His breathing was slow, each exhale weaker than the last. Ethan's throat tightened. Would they even make it in time? Minutes passed like hours. The sky darkened, the last rays of sunlight slipping below the horizon. The air turned cooler, sending a shiver down Ethan's body. The first Mustang let out a low, restless snort, shifting his weight. Then, faintly, in the distance, the sound of an approaching truck. Ethan exhaled, relief flooding through him. He stood quickly, waving his arms as headlights appeared on the dirt road far beyond the hills. A trailer followed behind the truck, kicking up dust as it sped toward them. "Valerie." The Mustang beside him perked up, ears flicking toward the noise. Ethan patted his neck reassuringly. "See, told you we had backup." Within minutes, the truck rumbled to a stop nearby, and the driver's door swung open. Dr. Valerie Quinn didn't waste a second. Dressed in jeans and a worn flannel, her blonde hair tied back in a messy bun, she grabbed a medical bag from the truck and rushed toward Ethan. "Where is he?" she demanded. Ethan gestured to the injured Mustang. Valerie dropped to her knees beside him, her trained hands moving quickly over the horse's body, checking vitals, examining the brand. She cursed under her breath. "He's bad. Dehydration. Malnourishment." "Ethan, if you hadn't found him." She shook her head. "You were right. Someone dumped him." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "And they left him to die." Valerie didn't argue. She reached into her bag, pulling out a syringe. "We need to stabilize him before we can load him up. Give me a hand." Ethan didn't hesitate. As Valerie administered fluids and checked for any fractures, he worked beside her, helping where he could. The first Mustang stayed close, watching every move. After several tense minutes, Valerie pulled back, exhaling. "He's weak, but he's fighting. We'll get him in the trailer and back to my clinic." Ethan nodded, his muscles aching from exhaustion, but his mind was still racing. "And the brand?" Valeri's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'll run it through the system. If he were part of an adoption program, I might be able to trace where he came from." Her expression darkened. "But if I find out someone intentionally left him here?" Ethan didn't need her to finish the sentence. He could already see the fire in her eyes. Together, they carefully maneuvered the Mustang onto a transport mat. then lifted it into the trailer. It took effort, patience, and a few encouraging nudges from the first Mustang, but eventually, the injured horse was secured. Ethan leaned against the truck, exhaling deeply. The first Mustang paced nearby, his tail flicking. "What about him?" Ethan asked, nodding toward the horse that had led him here. Valerie studied him. "You said he brought you to the injured one, yeah? Like he knew he needed help." Valerie crossed her arms. "Then I say we let him decide what he wants to do." Ethan turned to the Mustang. "Well, buddy," he said, taking a slow step forward. "Coming with us?" The Mustang watched him for a long moment. Then, to Ethan's amazement, he stepped forward willingly. Ethan's chest tightened. This horse hadn't just saved his friend. He had chosen to trust. As Valerie opened the trailer, the Mustang hesitated, only for a second before stepping inside, settling beside his companion. Ethan watched them for a moment, something deep and unspoken settling in his chest. They weren't just Mustangs, they were survivors, and their fight wasn't over yet. The night air was crisp as Ethan followed Valerie's truck down the dirt road, his headlights illuminating the dust that swirled in the wake of her trailer. His hands gripped the wheel tightly, his mind still, racing from everything that had happened. A wild Mustang had led him to an injured companion, a horse that had been branded. Someone had owned him, someone had abandoned him, and now Ethan needed answers. By the time they reached Valerie's clinic, a modest but well-equipped equine rescue facility, Ethan was out of his truck before she even turned off the ignition. The trailer rattled slightly as Valerie carefully lowered the ramp. Inside, both Mustangs stood side by side. The injured one was weak, barely able to lift his head, but his breathing had stabilized during the ride. The second Mustang, the one who had led Ethan to him, stood watchfully at his side. Unwavering in his loyalty, Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He had spent years photographing these magnificent animals, capturing their strength and resilience through a lens, but this was something far more powerful. "Let's get him inside," Valerie said, pulling open the trailer gate. It took careful maneuvering, but with patience and support, they eased the injured Mustang into a recovery stall. He let out a weak snort as Valerie adjusted a soft bedding of hay beneath him. Ethan ran a hand over his mane. "He's a fighter." Valerie nodded. Double quotes, "Yeah. But whoever dumped him out there didn't think he'd make it." Her voice was sharp-edged with barely restrained anger. Ethan knew she had spent her career fighting for horses others had discarded like broken tools. "I ran his brand through the registry," she continued, walking toward a nearby desk. "It's old faded, but I found a match." Ethan straightened as Valerie turned the screen toward him. He was part of a government adoption program, picked up from the wild 3 years ago and placed with a rancher about 2 counties over. Ethan's stomach twisted. A rancher, Valerie's expression darkened. "Yeah, and it gets worse." She clicked to another page, revealing official adoption records. He was sold again 6 months ago. No official paperwork on where he went after that. Ethan clenched his jaw. So someone took him in, then decided he wasn't worth the trouble. "Exactly," Valerie said bitterly. "Instead of rehoming him or returning him to the program, they abandoned him in the wild, where he had no chance of surviving." Ethan felt a wave of anger surge through him. He knew that not everyone who adopted Mustangs did so with good intentions. Some wanted cheap horses for work or breeding. Others saw them as a quick way to make money through resale. And some simply got bored when they realized a wild horse couldn't be broken overnight. Valerie exhaled, rubbing her temple. "I'm reporting this. If we can track down his last owner, we can hold them accountable." Ethan nodded. "And what about him?" He gestured toward the second Mustang, who had refused to leave the stall's doorway. Valerie studied the horse carefully. "He's healthy, no brand, no signs of past human contact. He's a true wild one." Ethan crossed his arms. "Then why the hell did he come to me?" Valerie smirked. "Maybe he saw something in you." Ethan snorted. "I doubt that." But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Mustang had known exactly what he was doing when he led Ethan to his injured friend. For the next hour, Ethan stayed at the clinic, helping Valerie settle the injured Mustang into care. He kept a steady hand on the horse's neck as Valerie administered more fluids, checked his vitals, and ensured he was comfortable for the night. The second Mustang never left his side. By the time Ethan finally stepped outside, the exhaustion of the day hit him all at once. He leaned against the clinic's railing, staring up at the sky. The stars stretched endlessly across the darkened plains like scattered diamonds. Valerie joined him, arms crossed. "You're not letting this go, are you?" Ethan shook his head. "No, someone left him out there to die, and I want to know why." She studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "I'll make some calls in the morning, see if I can track down any leads." On his last owner, Ethan exhaled slowly. "Thanks, Val." They stood in silence for a while, until she turned toward him with a knowing smile. "And what about the other Mustang?" she asked. Ethan glanced back at the stall, where the unbranded Mustang still stood, watching them carefully. "He's free," Ethan said simply. "He can go if he wants." Valerie arched a brow. "And if he doesn't?" Ethan hesitated. The thought had been lingering in his mind all night, though he hadn't wanted to say it aloud. What if this horse had already chosen to stay? Valerie patted him on the shoulder. "Get some rest, cowboy. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Ethan chuckled. "You say that like today wasn't." She grinned, then disappeared back inside, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. He turned back toward the Mustang, which still hadn't moved. Their eyes met again, and for the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he was the one being studied. What did this Mustang want? And more importantly, was Ethan ready to find out? The morning sun bathed the clinic in a golden glow, its light filtering through the wooden slats of the barn. Ethan rolled his shoulders, still sore from the day before. He had barely slept, his mind replaying every moment: the injured Mustang, the brand, the other horse that had led him here. He stepped into the barn, his boots echoing softly on the concrete floor. The injured Mustang lay resting, his breathing steadier than before. Valerie had been up before dawn, checking on him, and she'd left a note by the stall: "Stable for now, still weak, needs time." Ethan exhaled. That was the best they could hope for. His eyes drifted toward the second Mustang, the wild one, the one who had brought him here. The horse stood just outside the stall, head lowered slightly, his dark eyes watching Ethan closely. He had refused to leave since last night, standing guard like a silent sentinel over his fallen companion. Ethan approached slowly, holding out his hand. The Mustang's ears twitched, but he didn't back away. "That's new," Ethan muttered, stepping a little closer. The Mustang didn't bolt. Ethan knew wild horses didn't trust easily. It was in their nature to avoid humans, to keep their distance. But this one had already defied so many instincts, first by approaching Ethan out in the plains, and now by staying close even when he had every chance to run. "You're not like the others, are you?" Ethan murmured. The Mustang blinked, but remained still. Ethan didn't try to touch him, not yet. He knew better than to push. Instead, he simply stood there, letting the moment between them, the silence filled only by the occasional rustle of hay and the soft breath of the horses. Then, without warning, the Mustang stepped forward. Ethan held his breath as the horse brought his muzzle inches from Ethan's outstretched fingers. There was a moment of hesitation, a test of trust, and then, so lightly Ethan barely felt it, the Mustang touched his hand. A jolt of something powerful ran through him. It wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't just a coincidence. This horse had chosen him. Ethan let out a slow breath. "Guess that settles that." A chuckle came from behind him. "It took you long enough to figure it out." Ethan turned to see Valerie leaning against the barn door, arms crossed, a knowing smile on her face. "He's bonded to you," she said simply. "Not just because you helped his friend. He trusts you, Ethan. And that's not something you take lightly." Ethan looked back at the Mustang. Valerie was right. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This was something deeper. Something rare, something unbreakable. Valerie sighed and pulled out her phone. "By the way, I got a lead on the guy who last owned the injured Mustang." Ethan straightened as she scrolled through her messages. "It's bad. Rancher with a history of getting Mustangs through adoption programs and then dumping them when they're no longer useful. No official reports on him yet, but I think that's about to change." Ethan clenched his jaw. "You're turning him in." "Damn right I am," Valerie said firmly. "No more second chances for people like that." Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. And the horse, Valerie glanced toward the stall. He'll need a home once he's strong enough. She raised an eyebrow at Ethan. Unless you already have someone in mind. Ethan hesitated. He had never planned to take in a horse. His life was on the road, traveling, photographing, and documenting wildlife. But as he looked at the two, Mustangs, the survivor, and the one who had saved him, he realized something. Maybe his life was about to change. Maybe it already had. The second Mustang nudged his hand again, more confident this time. Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. This wasn't just about a rescue. It was about a bond. A bond neither of them had been looking for, but neither of them could walk away from it. Ethan turned to Valerie, a slow smile forming on his lips. Looks like I might have just found a new traveling partner. She grinned. I figured as much. Ethan patted the Mustang's neck gently. The horse didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into the touch, as if he had been waiting for it all along. Maybe Ethan had been waiting to. And for the first time in a long time, he knew exactly where he belonged. Weeks passed, and the small Loin clinic bustled with activity. Ethan spent every spare moment at the barn, gradually building trust with the Mustangs. He watched as the injured horse, now named Valor, slowly regained his strength, overcoming incredible odds to stand tall once again. Beside Valor was the Mustang who had started it all, now called Spirit, fittingly named for his courage and resilience. Ethan found himself transformed by their journey, learning patience, dedication, and the true meaning of trust. Each day brought new victories. Valor is taking his first steady steps. Spirit approached Ethan without hesitation. He even rested his head on Ethan's shoulder as they stood silently together under the wide open sky. Dr. Valerie Quinn had successfully reported the rancher responsible for Valor's abandonment. Authorities took swift action, shutting down his operation and rescuing several other neglected horses. The community rallied behind Ethan and Valerie's cause, offering donations and volunteer hours to help rehabilitate the rescued animals. Everything was falling into place, but Ethan knew the most significant challenge still lay ahead. One cool morning, Valerie approached him as he stood by the fence, watching Valor and Spirit grazing quietly side by side. The bond between the two Mustangs was stronger than ever, unbreakable. After all, they'd endured. Today's the day, Valerie said gently. They're ready, Ethan nodded, exhaling deeply. I hope I am too. You are, Valerie assured him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. You've given them both a second chance at life. You've done everything right. Ethan smiled gratefully, though nerves fluttered in his chest. He knew what Valerie meant. Today was the day Spirit and Valor would finally leave the clinic and move to their permanent home. But more than that, today, Ethan had to truly decide if he was ready for the responsibility, commitment, and life-changing journey of adopting two Mustangs. After Valerie left him to his thoughts, Ethan climbed into the pasture and slowly approached the horses. Spirit immediately turned toward him, ears pricked forward, curious and welcoming. Valor followed suit, still cautious but trusting Ethan completely. Ethan placed a hand on Spirit's neck, gently running his fingers through the horse's thick, silky mane. You saved him. Ethan murmured softly. You saved me, too. Spirit let out a gentle snort, nudging Ethan's arm affectionately. Valor stepped closer, leaning slightly against Ethan's side, as if to silently agree. At that moment, Ethan knew there was no turning back. Later that afternoon, Ethan carefully loaded the Mustangs into Valerie's trailer. They stood quietly, calm and confident, ready for whatever lay ahead. Valerie shut the trailer gate and then turned to Ethan, her eyes full of pride and warmth. You're doing the right thing, she said. These two couldn't have asked for a better partner. Ethan nodded, feeling the truth of her words deep in his chest. We saved each other. Valerie laughed softly. You really have become a horseman. Ethan smiled warmly. Guess so. Hours later, they arrived at Ethan's property, an expansive ranch he had recently purchased. Inspired by the profound bond he now shared with Valor and Spirit, fields stretched endlessly around them, lush with grass, water streams, and wide open space, providing the perfect sanctuary for Mustangs who had once known only hardship. As Ethan opened the trailer doors, Spirit emerged first, stepping out with his head held high, ears alert and eyes scanning the horizon. Valor followed closely behind. Carefully observing his new home, Ethan stepped forward. Standing between them, "Welcome home, boys," he whispered, his voice catching slightly. Spirit nuzzled his shoulder softly, as though understanding perfectly. In the days and weeks that followed, Ethan documented their journey, sharing their story with thousands who were touched by the courage, trust, and resilience of the two Mustangs. His photographs and videos became powerful symbols of hope, encouraging others to fight against animal cruelty and protect the beauty of wildlife. But most importantly, Ethan found peace. A profound, unshakable peace settled over Ethan, a peace born from knowing he had made a difference. Spirit and Valor flourished under his care, their trust deepening with each passing day, until their bond felt truly unbreakable. One evening, standing beneath a glowing sunset, Ethan watched Spirit and Valor gallop freely across the fields, their manes streaming in the golden light. He lifted his camera, capturing the moment forever. Two Mustangs, once lost, now united by a bond stronger than fear, stronger than pain, stronger than anything. As he lowered his camera, Ethan knew he had found his purpose, not just as a photographer, but as a protector, a friend, and a guardian to these magnificent creatures who had forever changed his life. He felt a quiet presence behind him and turned to see Valerie standing there, smiling warmly. "You know," she said softly, "I never doubted you could do this." Ethan laughed gently, glad one of us had confidence. She stepped beside him, gazing out over the fields. "So, what's next?" He watched the horses a moment longer, then smiled. "Keep fighting, keep sharing their stories, and keep giving horses like Spirit and Valor a second chance." Valerie nodded approvingly. "I like that plan." Ethan took a deep breath, savoring the peace around him. Valor and Spirit slowed their run, grazing quietly side by side, safe, healthy, and loved. Yes, this was exactly where they belonged. Exactly where Ethan belonged. If this story inspired you, remember, courage and compassion can overcome any challenge. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who needs hope and inspiration today.